Toxic Rain Pathfinder is one of the best all-around builds in Path of Exile. It can do absolutely everything in the game. We're talking about juice mapping, wave 30 simulacrums, breach stone farming, super fast heist and uber lab running, and it can clear all of the uber bosses. It's well known as a league starter build, but it's also a league finisher build. Hi, it's Larold, and this is my guide for Toxic Rain Pathfinder. It's my favorite build in the game. Everyone kind of knows and talks about this pretty often as a league starter. I see it brought up all the time in top league starter lists, but I don't really see many guides about Toxic Rain Pathfinder as a fully fleshed out, expensive endgame build. And what I want to do here is specifically talk about my setup for Toxic Rain Pathfinder that I use for endgame content. I recently made a guide on how I've been making a lot of currency without magic finding by doing Maven rotas. We're talking earning upwards of 50 divines per hour this league because the inflation in Affliction is absolutely out of control, and this is the build I used to absolutely breeze through that content. So now let's talk about the build. What makes this special? Toxic Rain is a chaos damage over time skill. It scales like a caster build more than an attack build, but it's able to get a lot of benefits that come with attack builds. Pathfinder grants you permanent flask uptime and significantly increased flask effect, so the playstyle is extremely fast and extremely smooth. It is also shockingly tanky, and it's really good against dot effects, which is something that's surprisingly uncommon among supposedly tanky builds. They often will have the caveat of not very good against damage over time. This build laughs at damage over time. I would say it clears all content with relative ease. In terms of the content that you do, the main appeal is mapping because it's so extremely fast and smooth. I really like it for the Maven rotation setup. I think it does really well in that. It's also very good for heisting and lab running. Any sort of content that values move speed, this build absolutely demolishes. You can do blighted maps as well. I really like this build for doing blight either in maps or blighted maps themselves. I think it's very good for both of those. And you can also do simulacrum. I did 2 simulacrums for this video, so you're welcome. That's like an hour of my life I can't get back. It's kind of boring, and it does waste a bit of the build's mobility, but it's pretty good. I did one of them deathless, realized I hadn't recorded, did another one, died once in wave 30. Very annoying, but you know, that's fine. 1 death among 2 simulacrums I think I can live with. You can also do uber bosses, and they're pretty clean. I did get all of my uber boss challenges done this league and pretty much every league with Toxic Rain Pathfinder, but they're not the most efficient. It's not a great uber bosser for farming currency when you compare it to like a penance brand that could do, I don't know, 500 million DPS. That is gonna kill bosses a lot faster than this build. I think one of the best aspects of Toxic Rain Pathfinder is that the budget for it ranges all the way from league starter to endgame, so you can get started, I mean, literally with no budget. You can play this on SSF even, and steadily expand the build as you farm more currency. Alright, let's jump in game here, and we'll start with the skill itself, Toxic Rain. How does it work? How do we scale it? When you use Toxic Rain, it shoots an arrow up into the sky. It lands as 5 pods on the ground. The pods attach vines to nearby enemies. Those vines deal damage over time, and they slow the enemies. At the end of the duration of the pods, they'll explode. This basically does no damage, neither does the initial hit. All of the damage comes from the vines attached to the enemies. So the way that we scale that is through gem levels and damage over time multiplier. We also use attack speed to get more pods out at a time, and skill effect duration, increased skill effect duration that is, to make the pods last longer. All 4 of these are really the main thrust of where we get damage from in this build. We also have a secondary link setup, a secondary 6 link setup in our chest where we use Mana Forged arrows and Toxic Rain of Withering combined with Withering Touch support and greater multiple projectile support to get a lot of extra secondary pods. These are not intended to really do any damage. They're just there to make sure that enemies are withered at 15 stacks all the time so that our main 6 link is doing as much damage as possible. We also have Frenzy in that so that we can get guaranteed Frenzy charges, which gives us quite a bit more damage, and Ensnaring Arrow just to slow enemies so that they stay in the pods. In terms of our defenses, we get about 1600 life per second from our life flask, and because we are a Pathfinder, if I can move up here, We have Master Surgeon, so that is basically able to like overleech or over sustain, and it doesn't fall off when we hit max health. All the rest of the Pathfinder tree really makes sense. This is definitely the ascendancy that you want to play as Toxic Rain. I've played Champion in the past. I played Trickster in the past. They both made sense at times long past, but not so much anymore. Now let's take a look at the path of building, and we'll just look at some of the other defensive layers we have here, some of the other defensive stats. 33k max hit, that is with Immortal Call active. Without Immortal Call, it's still 25k, which is quite good. And Immortal Call's base cooldown with 20 quality is, I think, 2.5 seconds, which is pretty good. I think the duration is around 2.5 seconds as well, so it's not quite 50% uptime, but it is approaching 50% uptime. Even if it's 30% uptime, that's still pretty good. And this is a very high Fizz max hit number, so I feel pretty comfortable with that. We also have 100% spell suppression, of course. We have complete ailment immunity. We have bleed and corrupted blood immunity from our life flask. We have stun immunity, and we are significantly overcapped on cold and lightning resistances so that we can very comfortably do blue altar farming. And when we get those minus resistances, minus cold and minus lightning resistances as a debuff from the altar, we totally negate it by just being significantly overcapped. It's completely fine. In terms of scaling our defenses and getting this massive Fizz max hit as a bow build, we use Fizz Taken as elemental. We use a lightning coil, which gives us 50% of Fizz Taken as lightning damage. We use a Watcher's Eye that gives us another, I believe 11% is what mine is rolled at, 11% of Fizz Taken as lightning. And then we use a Helm that gives us 8% of Fizz Taken as fire, and then it has an Eldritch prefix to give us 7% of Fizz Taken as lightning. So that's like 76% all combined, which is pretty good. We also have evasion, something like 20,000 evasion rating, which is pretty good. We are using Grace. We're not using a Jade Flask. We're just using Grace, and then just a lot of gear that has evasion on it. We're also using Progenesis, and that's kind of the real secret sauce here. We have a pretty well-rolled Progenesis. It's not perfect. I probably should go do a research Hillock and get it up to 26 quality. That would kind of be a little nicer, but still a pretty good Progenesis. And with all of the increased flask effect that we have in our tree and from our ascendancy, it gives us a pretty massive increase to our max hit, which then allows our life flask to do a lot of its work. It's like 1600 plus life per second. You can run Taste of Hate instead of Progenesis as a budget option. You can use both, but then you kind of have to make some adjustments elsewhere, maybe lose the Silver Flask, which is fine if you're willing to lose that damage, but I mean, look at how fast I'm moving with the Silver and Quicksilver Flask, fully enkindled up, Mage Blooded, Pathfinder, all of that. It is really quite satisfying just how quickly you're able to move on this class. In terms of mana, we do use Mage Blood. That really is the reason I chose to use Mage Blood in this build in the first place. You're able to use a crafted flask that has reduced mana cost of skills, the crafted suffix that you get from Unveiling Cinder Swallow Urns, and that's really important for making mana just kind of trivially easy. You can get away with not using a Mage Blood. You will need some skill, some flask effect in your tree, talents like Careful Conservationist or Natural Remedies are both really good. Just increased effective flasks with still a crafted reduced mana cost of skills flask. You'll probably also want to pick up some reduced mana cost of skills on, say, like some rare jewels. Like I'm using this very int heavy jewel to fix my very low int. Like I'm way too stupid in game to play this build. As you can see, taking that out, I'm way under my int. Instead of fixing int with jewel, you could fix your mana with jewels. Reduced mana cost on some rare jewels would get the job done. You can also get that as a prefix on rings. That helps a lot, and that's really essential for being able to use Malevolence in a Divine Blessing support, because you have reserved most of your mana, but not 100% of it. It's really crucial to get that Malevolence value or the cost of it down. You're running a Divine Blessing support. It is important to have that quality so you get that increased aura effect, and then you want an Inspiration support linked into that because Inspiration reduces the mana cost, and if you quality that up, that'll reduce the mana cost even further. One thing I want to touch on with Toxic Rain that is just particularly special about it is the way that it scales with area of effect. By gaining area of effect, it causes the pods to reach out further with the vines, but it also causes them to spread out further. So people smarter than me long ago figured out that the magic number for getting your pods to spread out just enough to still be able to all hit one enemy is 39% AoE. Now, apparently that's maybe more like 39 to 41%. Like, apparently you have a little bit more wiggle room than just an exact 39, but I try to shoot for exactly 39. You get 20 of that from this bow mastery that gives you 20% increased area of effect while wielding a bow. The quality effect for Toxic Rain used to also give you 10%, so that meant you just had to get 9% from somewhere else, but that was sort of buffed in 3.23 to be added base duration, which is great. I mean, that is a damage increase, but that means you now have to get 9% area of effect from somewhere and then 10% of area of effect from somewhere. The easiest place to get those are gloves and helm. You can also get it on your neck. It's probably best as a crafted thing, but I think generally speaking, I would rather have like just anything else on my neck because it is so easy to get on gloves and helm. And gloves and helm prefixes, they're not that competitive. You definitely want the socketed AoE gem levels as well anyway, so it all works out pretty nicely to just get it there. We also use Blood Rage just for the attack speed and the damage. The damage over time that it deals to you is totally negated by the Life Flask, so that's really trivially easy to deal with. I like that a lot. As for mobility skills, we use Withering Step on left click just for a lot of move speed, and then we use Flame Dash occasionally whenever we need to move. And finally, Auras, Purity of Elements, pretty basic, pretty important, and it really does make capping your reses a lot easier. And then Haste and Grace as our other two auras. And I like Vol Haste. It's not mandatory by any stretch, but it is nice if you have it. And I think I got this with a Vol Orb. I was just shooting for a level 21 Haste, so that'll work. In terms of gear, most of the gear that you wear is crafted gear. There are some uniques. Obviously, the Lightning Coil is a non-negotiable, essential unique. I got one with a increased damage corruption on it. I think I might have done this myself, actually. It's pretty nice. It's definitely not the only option. You can do a +1 to socketed gems corruption. That works out okay. And then I like to use the rare weapon, just a classic Toxic Rainbow. You want to get this up to quality 24 or better, and then enchant it, and then it's basically just, as you see here, this is a very, very common crafted weapon. A lot of guides for this. I'll definitely be putting out a guide for all of the crafted gear that I'm using in this setup because I do feel like there's not enough info on how to craft in-game Toxic Rain gear. There's a lot of stuff along the way, but actual in-game crafted Toxic Rain gear, kind of a dearth of information on that. As for jewels, I really wanted to key in on the jewels here. I am using a Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame. They have Gathering Winds, and that is why I have Gale Force, which gives me all this insane amount of extra action speed. Completely unnecessary. A total overspend. The Forbidden Flesh and Flame combined cost, I way overpaid for them. I think they cost like 500 or 600 divines at the time I bought them. I just had divines to burn, and I guess that's how my brain works. I have seen a lot of people ask about this in the previous video, like, do I need this? Hell no, not at all. You can just run rare jewels with like life and damage over time or attack speed with bows. Any sort of damage modifiers will work just fine. Life is good. Rare jewels are really good for fixing problems with your build, like this one that I'm using to fix my int. I mean, the build wouldn't work without it. That's really where I would go with this, and definitely I think that the Flesh and Flame are very, very inefficient in terms of like using currency. They're probably like 2/3 of the cost of this build, and they're such an egregious overpay that they're not a big deal at all. I am using that which was taken with Culling Strike, and your hexes can affect hexproof enemies, and every 4 seconds regenerate 20% of life over 1 second. These are all like really, really nice quality of life, not mandatory by any stretch. You can, instead of running Withering Touch support, or instead of running Greater Multiple Projectiles in the Mana Forged Arrow support, you can just run Culling Strike there instead. That is what people will do. It's what people did before this league. It's what people will do after this league. It's just nice to be able to get Culling Strike from either charms or that which was taken. And on the note of charms, I should mention the charms that I'm using are a strength and intelligence charm that also has occultist pops on it. Having those explosions is very nice. I'm also using one that gives me spell suppression and withered effect, and then one that gives flask charges gain flasks gain a charge every 3 seconds, and then I'm getting increased effective onslaught. There are lots of good modifiers available from charms. You can really fix a lot of problems with this. I fixed strength and int with this one. I fixed spell suppression with this one, and then I fixed flasks not quite having as much uptime as I wanted with this one. So really just very much a find the thing that you need to fix and then use charms to do that. All right, so now I have a little FAQ here. I feel like there are a lot of questions that'll be asked, and I kind of want to try to answer them before that even happens. Why run Mage Blood? It's not mandatory. I like it for the convenience. I like how it fixes mana costs. I like how you can get a lot of power from enkindling orbs on all your flasks. And I really just like the speed. I just like how fast it makes you and how reliable it is. You're never going to get screwed over by a map with affixes or map mods like reduced flask charges generated for players. It's nice to just always have this kind of zoominess going. A rare belt with flask duration, charges, and effect will work totally fine. It is what I use for the first week or two of a league before I can farm up a headhunter and then a mage blood and so on. It requires a different tree though, and that will make you need to pick up more flask charge generation and flask duration nodes like natural remedies, maybe like 1 point here where you get just 10% more flask charges. And so because of that, using Mage Blood, we're able to take some of these talents over here, like Farsight. We're able to just come this way and get a, Unnatural Instinct right in here and pick up this whole wheel without having to actually path into it. Just a lot of value that's added by Mage Blood. It really is like a problem solving item more than a build enabling item. Why not Headhunter? I've played with it. It does work super well for mapping. It makes mana costs harder. You have to either run Eldritch Battery up top or just a very different tree. And the damage is a lot lower when you don't have a bunch of affixes, a bunch of Headhunter buffs running. Also, FPS issues. It just completely sets my computer on fire to have 15, 20 pods per second and be attacking 30 times a second. Just completely destroys my performance. So that is another downside to Headhunter. It definitely works though. Okay, why not run all 3 elemental resistance flasks? That's very common to just run a Quicksilver and then just a Topaz, Ruby, and Sapphire flask and then a Life flask. The reason is damage and speed. I like the damage and speed that I get from Silver. That's it. And the only elemental resistance that I really have any problem capping is Topaz, and that is the one that I convert most of the fizz into, so that's why I'm running a Topaz flask. Or I should say lightning is the elemental resistance I'm having problems with, so that's why I'm running Topaz as the flask of choice. Why not drop Life Flask? That would be more convenient. It's an option. A lot of people pursue that. They will drop this node entirely, Master Surgeon, and they'll just put another point into a flask effect and charges gained. Small passive for the Pathfinder. That's really good. I mean, 5% more flask effect is really good. 10% more charges gained is really good for your Progenesis. You could drop the Life Flask and run Taste of Hate there. The problem is then you are trading some quality of life away. The Life Flask trivializes damage over time and bleed and corrupted blood. It's more annoying to actually hit the Life Flask for a lot of players, right? That's not a problem for me. I just bind it to my mouse. It's very comfortable, but some people dislike it, and that's why they go that route. You can run Defiance of Destiny in your neck, and that's usually what people will do. They'll run Defiance of Destiny as the neck, drop the Life Flask entirely, and then have no problem staying alive. Very, very easy to stay alive that way. Why don't I do that? Damage. This is a +2 neck. It took me literally thousands of alts spammed to get this neck crafted, and it's worth about 25% of my damage. So is that 25% more damage worth being mortal? In my case, I think so. But for a lot of people, Defiance of Destiny is the preferred move, and then you just deal with the fact that you're doing 25% less damage. It's not that bad. I think I already answered the question, do you need Forbidden Flesh and Flame? Absolutely not. They are most of the cost of this build, literally. I think they tripled the budget. So you can just run rare jewels with life, attack speed with bows, chaos damage over time multiplier, or build fixing bonuses like stats, resistances, reduced mana cost. All of those will work really well. In terms of build disabling mods, there are really only two. No regen, which is solvable by just taking one of the jewels out of your 6-link. That's fine. It does turn off your mana forged arrows though. And that is something I maybe glossed over with the mana forged arrows. We are running 3 small cluster jewels that just give high damage passives, and then we are running 1 cluster jewel that gives increased flask effect duration, and we are taking spiked concoction in here. So spiked concoction makes it so that you have increased effective flasks 10% while it's up, and you get that for 4 or 5 seconds after you use a flask. So with that active, we have a mana cost of 1 on our Toxic Rain. That's really important for making it so that our Mana Forged Arrows has like a 0 cost. Yeah, 0 cost here on our Toxic Rain of Withering, and a 1 on our main Toxic Rain. And that's why we're only using a non-channeling skills have -5 to total mana cost on our crafted prefix here on this Amethyst ring, instead of like running 6 or 7. We're doing it that way so that we're able to consistently trigger the Mana Forged Arrows over and over again. So in situations where you're dealing with a no regen map, maybe you put it in, didn't realize what it was, and now you're like, well, I don't want to throw the map away. It's fine. You just take the 6th gem out, just any of them works, and then, you know, you just deal with no Mana Forged Arrows. It's annoying, but it's fine. Less recovery of life, and Energy Shield, on the other hand, basically turns off your life flask, which is very, very dangerous and really like my least favorite affix, even more than no regen. Now, as for a couple of ones that are not lethal but are annoying, I would say -% max res sucks. It really, really sucks with this build, since we convert so much of the fizz that we take into elemental. Having to take like, I mean, twice as much elemental damage or whatever from that is really bad. And then reduced aura effect's just very annoying. It makes you slower, makes you do less damage, makes you less tanky. Everybody hates reduced aura effect. Now to cover the Pantheon, I'm using Lunaris since this is mostly a mapping build. And then I like Soul of Rizlatha as my minor Pantheon. Solaris is very good though. It does give you crit defense due to the captured Megara. Take no extra damage from crits if you've taken a crit recently. This is really, really good. I was running this for a while. Honestly, either of these are fine. I kind of just like the move speed that you get out of Lunaris. As for the minor, Rizlatha is basically just a generically useful one, and I was doing Maven rotation with this character a lot, and the enemies you've hit recently have 50% reduced life regeneration rate is actually very good against Maven. If you do Blight at all, you definitely want to switch over to Aberrath to not be affected by the Burning Ground from the Blight Fire Lane guys. Those guys can do like, I don't know, 100 trillion DPS with some of their Burning Ground, so just being completely unaffected by that is super, super important. As for bandits, kill them all. As for leveling, I like to level as Caustic Arrow or Splitting Seal until level 12. Then I switch to Toxic Rain at level 12 and I'm good to go from there. I will have a leveling build coming later, but I really just wanted to emphasize kind of the high end first, just to show like this is the aspirational end of what this can be. All right, I think that's about all I have to say about Toxic Rain now. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please ask. I'll be happy to answer them, and I am planning to work on a gear crafting guide fairly soon, so hopefully that'll answer any questions about that as well. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.